Welcome to the Book Club Life, where we talk a lot about books and a lot about life, and sometimes have awesome author interviews. And today I am up at the Mississippi River Readers Retreat, and one of the co-founders of that is author extraordinaire Gabrielle Meyer. And I had heard a lot about her but hadn't read any of her books yet, so I asked around, what's your favorite Gabrielle book? And this book was one that was a popular one. I'll put it up close there. Seven Brides for Seven Texans is a collection. And so I tried it out. And by the end of the prologue, I was already cracking up at a certain one of the characters, and it turned out it was your character. Yeah. And she was the first one in the book, and I just loved it.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you for sitting down with me and coming to this interview with me.
Thank you for asking me.
So will you tell us a little bit about the premise of the book before we dive into the book club questions?
Sure. So this is a collection by 7 different authors, and it's a chronological collection, so each story is connected to the one before it. We share all of the same characters, but it's about 7 brothers, and they're given an ultimatum at the beginning of the year that if they don't get married by the end of the calendar year, they will lose their inheritance.
Yes.
And so it's about each of these 7 brothers and how they go about finding their bride. And I had the youngest brother in the story. I don't even remember how they were divvied up. I think we just kind of said, hey, this is the one I would like to take.
Okay.
And so I asked for the youngest brother, but I decided that since he was the youngest and he never got to do anything first, that he was determined to be the first to get married.
Yes.
And so it kind of worked out too, because as the first author in the book, I didn't really have to worry about the other stories and what was happening, so I didn't have to keep track.
Yes.
So it was kind of a little selfish on my part, but it was still a lot of fun to create that character. And
well, and I loved that dynamic of, and that brings me actually to our first question, so I'll go ahead and just dive in. But be sure and subscribe and like our video, and I'm going to dive right into the book club questions that I'm going to ask Gabe or Gabrielle Meyer about her book and the quotes and themes in there, but you can duplicate these questions in your own book club. So the main character is the youngest son, and there's a quote in there that says, he'd also prove to his family that he was no longer a child. And I thought a lot of people could identify with that needing to prove yourself, of feeling that you're discounted or kind of just, oh, that's just, you know, I'm not going to use any characters' names. That's just Gabe, that's just Jenny. And that need to prove that you're valuable, that you can do it, that you can succeed. Have you ever felt that?
Yeah.
And then how did it go? And then have you arrived at a place of just confidence and rest? And how did you arrive there?
Sure. It actually is related to my writing. I grew up in a very small town in central Minnesota. It's less than 9,000 people. And I remember as a child having big dreams. I wanted to be a published author, and I knew a lot of these authors. I didn't know them personally, but I knew their names, and I thought, wow, they must have these big lives, and you know, they've achieved these things. And I remember as a child hearing, and not, you know, from nobody in particular, I can't remember a specific person, but kind of the general idea that if you're from a small town, you don't achieve big things.
Oh, really?
And I've actually now, as a parent with younger children, that's something that I'm very purposeful about, not letting my children believe that.
Yeah.
I remember hearing at a baseball game a couple of years ago I have twin boys who are 11. I remember a parent saying, well, our kids are from this small town. They're never going to be professionals. And I just remember thinking that's a horrible, that's a horrible thing
limiting
to
statement,
limit, right?
Yeah.
So as a child, that was this idea, and so I kind of wanted to prove myself. Like, just because I'm from a small town doesn't mean I can't have big dreams. And you know, chasing my dreams, that might have been the start of it. It changes, it morphs, it kind of your dreams change and grow. But as I became an adult and I started to realize that my worth was not in my achievements, my worth wasn't whether I got a book contract, whether I wrote, just being able to settle into who God created me to be, the purposes He created me to be, and they're small and they're big and they're in between, and God has several purposes for us.
Right.
And I think that when we actually settle into that and we're confident in that, the peace that we get, the assurance that we get, it surpasses any dream that you can ever have.
Right.
You know, if you can just settle in and be like, you know,
Just be okay with being you, and you're loved by the Lord.
Yep.
And just enjoy each day as it comes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is similar to, like, some people go through this before they get married is, I want to be married, I want to be married, I want to be married. That's when life starts, is when I get married. But really, it can start whenever you're ready to start. It can start today.
Exactly. Yep.
But anyways, I like your answer.
Okay.
And speaking of small towns, we are filming. So Gabe is Gabrielle. Sorry.
Either one, it's fine. No, it's good.
Gabrielle is employed by the Minnesota Historical Society. We're filming just. I can see her childhood home. The Mississippi River is behind us. You've got to go check out her author page on Facebook or Instagram. She has the most beautiful riverside pictures. I love your social media pictures.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Another quote. He had never met a woman who responded to him the way that blank had. I don't want to give away any characters. It was a refreshing change. So I would love to know, how did you meet your husband, and what attracted y'all to each other?
Sure. So having grown up in a small town, you would think you would know everybody, but I didn't know my husband growing up. I actually was homeschooled, and he went to a private school, so neither one of us really went. I went to public school for a couple of years, but we were actually in high school, and we had some mutual friends, and one of my friends was in a play at the high school. It was a summer production, a big community production. She asked me to come and pick her up. And so I was sitting, it was a dress rehearsal, and I was sitting out in the audience, and they were doing Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. It was this big production. And in the middle of the show, the curtain started to close, and the director was like shouting, like, you know, stop everything. The band comes to a halt, and he said, which Meyer is doing that? Like, assuming it was one of either my brother or my husband or his two brothers, because they were all in the play. And my husband, he was 16, he runs out on stage, he was one of the brothers in the show, and he throws his arms up, he's like, I swear it wasn't me. And I remember sitting up thinking, well, who is that? I've never seen him before. And so of course I had to ask my friend, who is he, and work out a introduction. So that was the first time that I saw him. Then we were introduced by a friend, and
Saw him on stage.
Yeah. So
was he trying to save the show, like act like it was part of the show?
Right? No, it was just a dress rehearsal. So
a dress rehearsal.
It was just a dress rehearsal. So so an instant, like, wow, who is that? And he has a beautiful voice. He's actually going to be singing worship at the retreat tomorrow.
Oh, that's awesome.
At the Mississippi River Reader Retreat with our daughter, who also is a singer, and she's on the same stage because we're both from this small town.
That is neat.
So attraction. For me, he just confidence, that goes back to that.
Yes.
Yeah, very confident. He knew who he was even at the age of 16, and I had been homeschooled for quite a while, so I was very confident. He liked that about me too. We were both very mature for 16, and
that's good. I think that's unusual at 16. I'm guessing.
Yeah, no, I would say it's unusual. I have 16-year-old. She's actually 17. She's very mature. But yeah.
Well, I met my husband not much later, in my 20s, but I was attracted to his confidence as well. In fact, when he told me he loved me, I cried because I couldn't say it back. Because for me, that was like, I'm not saying that unless it's also, I will marry you if you ask me.
Yes.
And his response wasn't hurt. It wasn't, he's like, hey, you don't have to say it back. I'm just letting you know how I feel.
Yeah.
And that just took all the pressure off. And I thought it was a very confident response.
Yeah.
So where did you meet your husband? Tell us in the comments. Okay, speaking of confidence, I loved this quote. There's a little bit of, I just love the attitude, a little bit of attitude and confidence in this story. So one quote is, he's arrogant and stubborn. So what do you think is the difference between confidence and arrogance? Because there can be a fine line, but you also don't want to have low self-esteem.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people kind of go into different, dip into low self-esteem, get back to confidence, get into arrogance. Whoops, you're humbled.
Right.
What's the key to that to you? It
is a fine line, and I think because of my faith, I would say that confidence is knowing that my ability comes from God.
That's good.
It's not my, and I think that when I start to rely on my own ability and I'm not trusting Him, that's where arrogance comes in, and I think that that's where pride comes in, and that's why we fall. Because if we're not placing our complete trust and faith in the abilities He gives us. That's where that line is for me, I think, is going, okay, this is definitely, and when we walk in the abilities that God gives us, that makes us need to rely on Him. And I think that's the key right there.
I love that answer. I strive for being confident and steady, but I do dip sometimes.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'll realize that, oh, you know, it doesn't matter how this thing goes or what the outcome is. I'm okay, just enjoy myself and do my best to obey the Lord.
Well, and I think too, when we walk in the confidence of the Lord, there's so much grace there that when we mess up and we can acknowledge, like, wow, that was me here trying to do something maybe that I shouldn't have or whatever, and just having the grace to know that if I didn't accomplish this thing or I didn't do it, you know what, God is still with me, and I
like when our kids mess up, we're not worried about it, you know, we're just totally. Okay. So one of the characters in the book is struggling to figure out God's call on their life. Have you ever struggled with, God, what do you want me to do? Should I go this way or that way? And just that indecision. And then how did God settle that for you?
You know, I think I am kind of unique in this way, and I didn't realize it until I was older, but I have always known what I wanted. And of course, there's a lot of different ways to get to the end result. But it wasn't until I was older and I started having adult friendships and realizing that there are just so many adults who are still in their 30s and 40s and 50s going, I still don't know what I want to do with my life. And knowing that that's okay and that's very normal. But even as a small child, I knew I wanted to be a mom. I wanted to be an author. I wanted to homeschool my children and all of these things. And the struggle has come in for me going back to what God wants, just because all of those things are good. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's what God wants for me. And so there's been times where I've been striving to get this thing that I want, and God is kind of putting blocks up, saying you need to strive, or not even strive, but you need to go after me. And then these other things will fall into place. So, and of course there's been times where it's like, which way do I go, God? You know, which should we buy this house? Should we buy that house? Should I write this book? Should I write that book? You know, should I homeschool my children? Should I not homeschool my children? And I think it comes back to that grace, knowing that even if I make the wrong decision, that God is bigger than my decisions. And He still has that grace for me. And no matter what, if I'm placing my trust in Him, He's going to work it out. And even if it doesn't look like what I think it should, or how I want it to look at the end, knowing that I can trust that He's got a bigger plan than I know. He can
definitely work things out, fix things. And I love Psalm 103. I hope I'm getting that right, but where He satisfies your desires with good things. So you can just trust in that. And I love that, for me at least, the day by day is so simple. Love God, love people. And then the how and what is sometimes who He puts in your path. And then, like you said, for the big things, the things where you have to make a decision, just that prayer and peace, and knowing that if you make the wrong decision, He'll get you back to the right decision sooner or later. Okay, another quote. It was the place you felt closest to God. Where is a place that you have felt close to God?
Literally right where we're at, which is really cool that we're doing this here. I grew up here, quite literally. This was my backyard, and I still live just a couple of blocks down the river from here. And that was a gift from God, because I never, you know, I grew up on the river and had lived away from it for a while, and it wasn't like a goal to get back to the river, but this house came available for us, and it was all in God's timing. It was perfect. And so my backyard, when I say my favorite place in the entire world is my backyard, it literally is. And there's something about the river, that living water, that I feel closest to God right there. I feel like there's just something about it. And and I know Jesus was baptized in a river because of that living water. And whenever I'm feeling stressed, or whenever I need inspiration, there's a river in almost every single one of my books, because it's such a huge piece of my story that I want it to be a part of the stories of my characters. I
love that, how you weave your own life into your stories. That's beautiful. I do also love being out in nature and just being amidst all His creation and the beauty. I love it.
There's another piece of it too, because I love historical fiction. Oftentimes people change, culture changes, but nature doesn't.
Right.
The river doesn't change, the
Yes.
trees don't, the rain. So
Yes.
that's a timeless part of his creation
Yes.
that I love.
I do too.
Yeah.
Okay, one more really good question. I love this question actually before we get into the just for fun section. So there's a quote in here and I totally agreed with it. We get strong by enduring the storms of life. If we're always sheltered, we'd be too weak to stand. So what is a storm that you have endured and how did it make you stronger?
Oh, goodness, there's a lot. I'll first tell you why I remember writing that very scene in that line. When I was a kid, we went to Arizona to the Biodome.
Okay.
There's a Biodome down there where they tried to create an environment inside of a protected dome, a glass dome. And one of the things that stood out to me as a child is that the trees that they were growing inside of this dome were extremely weak. And one of the reasons they were weak is because there was no wind and no storms pushing
Okay.
against it. And they realized that trees become strong because of the wind and that
Right.
resistance to it. And so that was very specific. And I've applied that to my life in so many ways. There's been quite a few, but when my second daughter was born, we had some complications and I had to have an emergency surgery and my blood pressure dipped dangerously low.
Oh my gosh.
And so I was unconscious, and so they had to bring me back to a bit of consciousness to stabilize my blood pressure.
It was after you delivered her?
Yep, so
Okay.
she was delivered. I was bleeding and I won't go into all the details, it's unnecessary. But because of that, I had lost a lot of blood, and so they had to bring me back up. So I was semi-conscious in the midst of a surgery.
Wow.
And I had a very traumatic experience under anesthesia, as you can imagine. And coming out of that, I had to have blood transfusion, and it took months to physically recover, but it took years to mentally and emotionally recover. And I still get emotional about it because God used that to reveal himself to me in such amazing ways. And I can't even recount all of them, but it was a very specific process that he was taking me through. And I knew that I needed to go through that to write the stories he needed me to write. I needed to understand suffering. I needed to understand that up until then, I was raised as a Christian, had a very strong faith growing up, and I always knew I wanted Jesus. But it was after that experience that I realized I needed Jesus, and the difference for me was like a shift in my entire
Everything changed.
Everything changed. And so I think that that's what I bring to my stories. That's what I bring to my parenting, to everything I do, is the difference between wanting and needing. And so, and my daughter is actually, I just caught a glimpse of her. She's here with us this weekend. And knowing that I would do that, go through that experience over and over and over for her, and realizing that that's what Christ did for us.
Wow.
Is go through it over and over for us.
Right.
And his work is completed, so he doesn't have to continue. But that just was such a profound experience that just has strengthened me and has helped me weather so many other storms.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that. That's
You're
amazing.
welcome.
And she was your second child.
She was
So
my
you still went on to
second.
have other children.
So that was the coolest part. I wasn't sure. I wanted several children, and after that experience, it was so traumatizing. And I remember very clearly having a moment with God where I was like, I want more children. And I felt that my children would be powerful for the kingdom of God, and that there was an enemy trying to prevent more children. And so just knowing that I needed to trust God, that he would be faithful.
Yeah.
So we got pregnant again, and it was twins.
Wow.
And we named our sons Judah and Asher.
Wow.
Judah means praise God, and Asher means happy and blessed. And
Oh
we
my
say
gosh.
that he gave us a double portion for the struggle that I had endured. So
Wow.
yeah,
Oh
we're
my
very
God.
blessed.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
My little brother and sister are twins as well.
Yeah.
So twin family.
Yes. It's been fun having twins. They're crazy.
Well, going from that to the just for fun questions. If you are enjoying this interview, I would love it if you would give us a like on YouTube. And so we'll try to go quick with these because we're probably running out of time. Okay, if you inherited $1 million, what's one thing you would spend it on?
Oh my gosh, just for fun, I would totally remodel my house.
Okay.
I love entertaining, and there's so many different things I would do to make it easier to entertain in our home.
That's a good one. Do you have a favorite quote, verse, joke, song?
My favorite song is Amazing Grace. I love that song.
It's timeless. That's
Yep.
a good one. Okay, people may be surprised to learn that you...
That's a hard one. I don't know. I can't think of something. I would
Okay.
say people might be surprised to learn that I'm a second-generation homeschooler. So I
Okay.
was homeschooled, and now we homeschool our
Now you
children.
homeschool.
So that might be.
Do you have a favorite curriculum? Or is that a loaded question?
Yes, every child needs a different curriculum. That's what I've learned.
Okay. If you could go back and just give yourself some quick advice, go back to yourself when you were young and married, newly married,
Yep.
what would you tell yourself?
I would tell myself to just relax and enjoy the journey. I think we were constantly like
Yes.
trying to get to that next phase of life and missed out on the joy of each phase.
That's so good. I love that. An author you love is blank because blank.
An author I love, oh my gosh, there's so many, so I don't want to, hurt
It's not your
anybody's
favorite,
feelings.
just the one that comes to your mind
Yes,
at the
okay,
moment.
so Laura France, one of my favorite
I love her
authors.
too.
And it was her book, The Colonel's Lady, that I knew I always wanted to be a writer, but I read that book and I remember asking myself, why am I not writing stories like this? Or the stories I was meant to write, but why am I not doing it? And I've told her, and she knows that she's a big part of that journey.
She is, she's one of my top favorite
Yes,
authors.
I
She's
love her.
amazing. My first book of hers was Courting Mara Little, and that was before the days of Goodreads and tablets and everything. And I wrote on a Post-it note and stuck it to my wall. I was like, I have to look her up again and find some more books.
Yes.
What are you working on, and where can readers find you?
I am working on my next book for Bethany House. It's the second book in the Time Crossing series called Timeless.
Okay.
I'm on GabrielleMeyer.com, and I'm on Facebook far too much. I have an author page on there. So those are probably the two best places.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Well, if you would like to see some more interviews, click on the videos tab right on YouTube. Or if you don't prefer YouTube, you can go to jennysnow.net, and there's a Book Club Life section on there, and you can scroll down and see all the favorite authors that you have and check out some interviews. Thank you guys for joining us, and thank you, Gabrielle. You were wonderful. I so appreciate you.
Thank you.
Happy reading.
Bye-bye.